Welcome to the Mold Matters Podcast. Whether you are looking for help recovering from mold illness or just want to learn more about creating a safe environment for your family, this podcast is the place for you.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Mold Matters Podcast. My name is Jeremy Evans. I am your host alongside Mike
Hey, Jared.
Adams.
Hey. As soon as you said that, I cleared my throat. So,
Yeah,
I guess we're good.
we're
Let's
good to
go. Yeah.
Yeah. Welcome to part two of a podcast that we did last week. We've kind of been talking about, we've kind of in parentheses titled this podcast, "So you think you don't have mold."
Right.
Oftentimes, it's just kind of part of our awareness campaign to help people realize that there is mold everywhere, and to kind of educate people about it.
Yeah, it really is. It's a two-part deal where you probably do have mold in your home and you don't realize it, and somebody in the home very well could be sick and you don't realize it's because of the mold in your home.
Yeah. So we kind of did we started a list of areas in your home that you may not suspect mold. And maybe these are some areas you could start looking and checking periodically and trying to take care of it, kind of prevention, nip them in the bud. We only got through half of our list last time. We'd like to continue that.
I actually got a text from one of our licensees, Jared,
Yeah.
and said, Mike, you missed one. And I'm taking this from a great quote from an episode of The Office, where Michael says, "It takes a big man to admit his mistake, and I am that big man." Anyway, we were notified that we did miss one, and it's not in our second section. So by the end of this second episode, we would have still missed it. He mentioned that he sees it a lot in the water feed line to either the fresh water or the ice machine in a refrigerator.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So
Yeah.
appreciate
Absolutely.
that. Yeah.
And that'll sometimes leak and you'll get leaking behind your fridge and you don't
Right.
even know it.
Yep.
And you'll get mold there.
Yeah.
That's actually not a bad, I mean, I've heard people say, just from a hygiene perspective, pull out your fridge every once in a while, once a year, sweep it, vacuum it, because it gets a lot of dust.
Yeah.
But actually, from a mold perspective, you got to check that.
I
Sure,
agree.
there's no water back there.
I agree.
Well, thank you to whoever that was. And you should have
That was
just,
Walter. Yeah.
oh, Walter?
Yeah.
You should have just said, you know what?
That's on the second.
That's on
yeah.
the second
No,
half.
that's why I said it takes a big man, and I am that big man.
Okay. So we kind of finished off last time talking about flooring, and then we'd like to start off today talking about air conditioners. And I might just say air conditioners, furnaces, HVAC units in general. So those are definitely, in fact, we were talking about this just prior to this on a webinar for our company, but this is probably one of the biggest culprits in the home of mold, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, especially in high humidity areas.
Mm-hmm.
It's a nightmare because the air is so moist and the air conditioning coils get so cold. They're going to condensate like crazy, and they're designed to try to drain that water away, but it's never foolproof.
Yeah.
And it grows mold in there.
Yeah. Those, I guess maybe people don't understand the coils too well, and that's fine if you don't. But basically, the air has to travel through. They're usually A coils. It's the shape of an A, and they either heat them up really hot or they cool them down, like freezing cold. And so as the air passes through, that the temperature change actually, the water causes the water to condense off, and then it collects that and it drains it.
Drains it off.
Yeah, you'll see a drain in your utility room usually.
And that usually has mold in it as well. And that drain.
Yeah, exactly. That's the nastiest drain in your house, probably one of them. Well, you would argue kitchens, like we talked last time. So yeah, those coils just get really wet,
And coincidentally, it usually feeds into the floor drain of the utility room,
yeah,
which usually gets very, very little. Nobody's filling up their floor drain to make sure the P-trap is full.
yeah.
And so it's just an area that's kind of problematic.
Yeah. So air conditioners, some prevention tips.
One thing I will say is changing your filters regularly. If you slow down the flow of air because your filter is dirty and plugged, that's going to make it so your air conditioner is less efficient and it's not going to be able to dry that water off as efficiently as it should.
Off the coils.
Right.
So simply having airflow over those can help.
Help a ton. Yeah.
Help that not to not get wet. So yeah, that's a good tip for each. It's kind of hard to get into those, as just a regular homeowner, to get into those and look at the coils and things. Prevention is really the best way to go. Keeping them dry, keeping air flowing over those constantly is a good idea. So that's HVAC, and then that kind of leads to this next one, dehumidifiers. And we talk about this as a mold prevention tool, where it's really humid, certain crawl spaces or certain areas where there's no airflow, a storage room, somewhere where you really need to bring the humidity down. But it can also be a source of mold.
Yes, I cannot tell you how many dehumidifiers I have seen in my life where they have just kind of forgot they were down there, and they maybe have the bucket or the container that collects the water. Maybe it's half full or 3/4 full, and somewhere along the line somebody either turned it off or unplugged it and went on vacation and forgot about it.
Yeah.
And it's a moldy mess.
Yeah, because again, those dehumidifiers typically have a coil in there, and then they do the same thing your HVAC does, right? They collect the moisture, pool it, and then the thing about at least the good ones, you have to drain that water somewhere,
right,
into a drain or something.
Some of them, they don't hook up the drain, they'll just allow it to fill up in the bucket and think, I'll just remember to dump that bucket.
Yeah.
People don't remember to dump that bucket.
Exactly. So clean those out, keep an eye on them.
I would even say, along with dehumidifiers, that's not on our list, but humidifiers as well. I don't like humidifiers installed on furnaces anyway.
Yeah.
But even just your single room humidifiers, they can get pretty gross, and I would just say throw it away and start over. It's like a $25 piece of equipment.
Yeah.
No point. You're usually going to run a humidifier if somebody in the house is sick. You have a sick kid or something. And the last thing you want to do is run a moldy humidifier in a sick child's room.
Yeah.
That's terrible.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much any device that you have to put water in, you got to be careful with it. Because I was just thinking, I do a water floss pick. Have you seen those or heard of those?
Yeah.
And I didn't use it for a couple weeks, and I just used it a couple days ago. And as soon as I started, I told my wife, I was like, "Oh, this tastes moldy." Or like,
really?
Yeah, because I obviously didn't get all the water out of there.
Yeah.
And it just sat in there for a while, and all of a sudden I was like, "Oh, gross." So you got to be really careful with any device that has water in it. Sorry to throw in one more on that. I just remembered another one. My wife's parents have a piano that they humidify.
I was with you when we discovered that. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was horrendous.
They use it, so even guitars sometimes they'll humidify them because really dry wood
will crack and
whatever.
Yeah.
So they had a humidifier under the piano. And did you discover it? Was it you that discovered it, or was it?
Well,
I can't remember.
We're all winners here, Jared.
I'm not. No, I just can't remember the story.
I can't either, but I know we both found it.
I remember we pulled it out and we were like, "Oh my gosh!"
It was bad.
Just,
it was horrendous.
We ended up just chucking the whole.
And I remember I wrote to my dad because my dad's been in the music industry his whole life. Yeah. And I was like, "Is this common?" And he said, "Yeah, they actually used to be pretty common." He said, "They're not a good idea, but they are. They used to be pretty common."
He agrees they're not a good idea.
Yeah, he didn't like them at all. And he owned a music store. So.
Yeah. I've never had a humidifier. I play the guitar. Never had a humidifier. I've never had an issue with my guitar cracking. And I live in a so-called desert. Yeah. So, okay, so that's humidifiers. Windowsills. This is one of your top 3 favorite topics.
Yeah, windowsills are notorious, especially on a north side of a home, which is the colder side of the home, and on windows that have the track where they slide left to right. The windows that are almost like a sash that you just raise straight up, they're not nearly as bad. But the ones that you slide left to right that have that track in them,
it almost like can catch the water and filth, right?
Yeah, and they designed them. It's kind of weird how they designed them. I understand why they did it, but they put kind of like an arch, the length of the window, in the track to try to kind of cover up the water as it drains down, and then there's actually a little weep hole in the frame
Yeah.
that never ever works right.
Yeah.
And so you just get dirt and dust and water and then mold and then
Does
more
that-
dirt and then more mold
Does that weep hole go? Does it supposedly drain out down?
on the outside. Yeah.
Is it supposed to go straight down?
Yeah. There's a little. It's about maybe 3/4 of an inch.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
On the outside of the frame, and it's supposed to just drain down the outside of the
Straight
house. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Usually
I've
that's
seldom, if ever, seen them work correctly.
that's so interesting. Yeah. Yeah. Those are check your window sills if you're curious. I'd say 1 out of 2 or 3 homes has window sills that have mold.
Yeah, and remember how microscopic mold is as well. You know.
You may not even see it. It's true.
Right.
Okay, window sills. Some prevention there. I think cleaning those out every so often. One of your cleaning, if you have a cleaning lady, you clean yourself. That ought to be on the list every once in a while.
I agree, and I think, it's a little bit of a pain, but I think lift the window that does slide back and forth, lift that out so you can get that whole curved archway out of there and
Yeah.
clean out under there really well. It's time well spent.
Yeah.
Did you know the levels of some hazardous pollutants in indoor air have been found to be up to 70 times greater than in outdoor air? But who's monitoring that for you? Check out mypureproducts.net for the latest in monitoring devices and DIY mold test kits. Take control of your environment with mypureproducts.net.
Order your air filters through Pure Products with the February Filter Frenzy Sale. Get 20% off all filters that are pre-treated with an antimicrobial agent, creating a healthy environment for you and your family. Visit mypureproducts.net and use promo code FILTERFUN20 for a discounted and pre-treated filter today.
Okay, so that's window seals. Let's go to vents. We talked about HVAC units. Let's talk about vents themselves. What do you see with mold in vents?
One thing that sticks out in my mind right now, because Brandon, my son, just built a home, is that, and his builders were pretty good. They were pretty careful. But a lot of times brand new homes are just full of debris in there. And it's crazy the stuff you can find in a vent.
It's true.
I've never been a huge fan of getting your HVAC system cleaned by an HVAC company. You know,
Duct cleaning
the duct cleaning,
services.
yeah. I don't disparage it at all, but I've just never met anybody that said, wow, did we ever feel better after we cleaned the ducts?
Yeah.
And so, it's just a tough deal where, try to keep it clean and even on the register covers themselves, try to keep those clean. I see that they can get moisture and then start to grow mold, and it looks like they're just dirty, but oftentimes it's mold on those registers.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. I don't know if this is more prevalent in the humid areas, but I feel like when I go to humid areas, you'll just look up some of those registers and they're just terrible. Oh, horrendous.
Yeah, I see it a lot in the restaurants as well.
Yeah. I'm wondering if that's because, is that a hot meets cold and it condenses
I
on
think
those,
so, yeah.
those metal registers
Right.
coming out and meeting room
Room
temperature air,
temperature, conditioned air. Yeah.
and then it just, so they get wet over time. And again, metal's a horrible food source, but you figure it's the dust.
It's the
that's
dust and dirt on the metal.
that's
Yeah.
on the metal. So,
Yeah.
So prevention there is obviously
Just keep it clean.
keep your homes
Yeah.
clean and as clean as you can, and then
Keep your filters changed.
Yeah.
Keep fresh filters in.
and maybe if you have that issue in your home, clean your registers on a regular basis.
Yeah.
I mean, take them down. That's a really annoying chore.
Yeah.
Really annoying.
Yeah,
But-
it is because you can never get the two little screws to line back up in that original hole. Either that or they're completely stripped out.
Yeah.
You know?
It's a very annoying chore. So
But
if you have
If you
some,
get it down and you stay on it, you'll be happy.
yeah, again, we're talking. This is mold prevention, and obviously coming from a perspective of people being really sick getting really sick from mold. So
Yeah.
think about that. Plants. Tell me about plants and mold.
You will just about always have mold in plants. You may not have dangerous mold in plants, but I can promise you every indoor plant probably has some sort of mold in it.
Yeah.
I'm not a big fan of them. I think if, you
In
have
the house, you mean?
in the house, yeah.
Yeah.
No, I like plants.
Okay.
Yeah, the plants are great.
Okay, I was
But-
about to call you out on that.
I worked at a check printing plant for years, so I think they're great. But no, plants are great. But I would say if somebody in the home is sick and you suspect mold, I would get the plants out of there as one of the first things you do.
Yeah. Okay. And a lot of people develop plantar fasciitis, I've heard.
Yes, that's for the plants.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
I
Yeah.
was totally thinking for the last 20 seconds, what would Mike say? What would Mike say? I know there's a joke with plants, and that's what came out.
Yeah.
So I'm learning from you. Yeah, I'm thinking of a house right now where they almost had a greenhouse as part of their house. It was a room where they just put all their plants and they grew them and they kept it a little more humid. I remember this house because I took like 8 air quality tests in it, and one of them was in there. It was a fairly newish house. All of them were just clean as a whistle, I mean, very low counts. And then that one was, again, it wasn't the dangerous molds,
Right.
but it was, I don't know, if I remember right, quadruple any other room.
Yeah.
And part of that, I think, is, there's moisture in there too. You're putting a lot
It's going
of
to raise
water
the
in there.
humidity level. Yeah,
Yeah.
because you're watering the
Yeah.
plants every day.
You're watering,
every few days.
they're respirating or whatever
Yeah.
they, photosynthesis, all that activity, So I think, I don't know that I would tell someone never get a plant in your house, but
Don't go
it's-
crazy with it.
don't go crazy. Yeah, it's the houses where there's tons of plants that, and you're sensitive. Because again, you got to get out of that mentality of, oh, is this a bad mold and this a good mold? That,
There are no good molds in the home.
yeah, like,
Yeah.
it's not great to, any of those molds when they get high enough can bother, especially sensitive people.
Yes.
Yes. So be careful with the plants. Now, firesides and chimneys.
Or fireplaces.
Fireplaces,
And
I said
chimneys.
firesides. Fireplaces and chimneys. You got any thoughts on those?
Yeah, I think it's really overlooked. I do think, however, that it's probably not going to present much of a health issue. This is just my own gut feeling, because I think a fireplace and a chimney is going to be a lot the same as what an attic is, and those want to typically vent up and out. That air typically is not going to come from the top of the chimney and go into the house. Particularly if you keep the damper closed when you're not using it. Obviously, when you have a fire going, the air is going straight up through that chimney. But it is a good thing to keep an eye on. I would make sure that the roof, the flashing and everything is correct, and you're not leaking water into the roof or into the attic where the chimney comes up.
Yeah.
And then just make sure, all the brick or rock work or whatever it is in good condition. So I don't think it's a huge issue, but I think it could easily be overlooked if you don't keep an eye on things.
Yeah, I think it's one of those rare occasions, but
Yeah.
probably something that
You
you
know
don't
what
think of.
did just remind me though, I did have a home that I treated years ago. It was way out it was in the middle of nowhere. It took me 3 or 4 hours to drive there. And it was an older couple, and I remember them being both really sick. And I started asking them about some things, and the lady brought up to me, she said, I think it's the chimney that's making us sick, or the fireplace. And I was like, really? And she said, yeah. I said, do you use the fireplace? And she said, no, we don't. And my husband didn't like the cold air wafting down into the house, so he's just stuffed a bunch of blankets
Oh no.
up into the chimney to try to insulate it himself, And so I scheduled to treat the home. When I came back, I like suited up in Tyvek and everything because I knew I was gonna have an ordeal.
Yeah.
It was horrendous, and it was only about 4 or 5 feet up from the ground level that I pulled those blankets out. Just absolutely full. So in that case, of course, that's making you sick.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, chimneys. I guess the cover tops that they put over them.
Yeah.
There could be some issues if those aren't working properly
Right.
and water's getting in,
Yeah.
even down into.
So he had 2 things going on. One is the chimney topper was completely missing.
Oh, was it? So water was getting right.
Oh yeah, soaking that stuff in it.
And then he put the-
Wondering, I got to stop that terrible draft. So he shoved stuff up in there, and it was bad.
Yeah, I had one too that I remember they thought it was in the chimney. And I remember we started kind of diffusing some product up the chimney, and we started hurting some birds.
Oh yeah,
Some birds
Yeah.
chirping. I felt kind of bad, but Yeah, it's an overlooked one, but one last thing on that. I'm just remembering another one where anytime you have something poking out of your roof, we talked about roofs in the last episode.
Right.
I mean, anytime you put holes in your roofs, and the chimney's usually a bigger, one of the bigger holes you'll put in there.
Yeah.
And so, like you said, flashing. And the thing about that is, if the flashing messes up there, you can have water go all the way down.
All the way down. Yeah.
So I'm thinking of a house where it went all the way from top floor all the way to bottom floor because of the flashing stuff on the chimney. So that one's a little more, from that perspective, instead of just a vent hole where it might drip into your attic, this is going to go all the way down the walls.
And probably be one that you don't discover for a long time.
Yeah.
Those are the worst.
Yeah. Okay, our last one, Mike. Let's talk about garages. And this is maybe a little overlooked one, but what do you think of when you think of mold in garages?
I think garages are notoriously wet, obviously in the winter, because you pull your car in the garage when it's snowing or whatever, and people tend to store cardboard boxes in their garages, and it's just it can be a really moldy environment. And then depending on if you have positive or negative air pressure, if you open up the door that goes from the garage into the house, you could be introducing mold into the home pretty quickly.
Yeah. I think of a garage that I was in where garages are unique because they're not really connected to the ducting system, right?
Right.
They're not conditioned. The air's not conditioned.
Yeah.
So I mean, in some ways that's a bonus, right?
Yeah.
If you get mold in there.
Yeah, it is. It is, but you're still opening the door, and it kind of becomes part of the house for a few seconds every day.
Yeah, and I'm remembering one where I felt sick in a garage because it was the ceiling of the garage, and the mold had come through from the roof and was dripping it, onto the ceiling, and I remember walking in and I'm like, I had a headache, and I was thinking, luckily, they're probably only in front of that patch, a couple minutes a day, but at the same time, definitely can affect your health. And garages as well as any space, luckily garages usually open a lot, but any space that's not conditioned, you always have to be really careful, right? Because it can get stuffy in there. We talked about on our earlier webinar, garages can get really hot in the summer, right?
Right.
Really steamy, really hot, and that makes it, mold can.
And then, like you say, people tend to put cardboard boxes full of junk in there, and they get wet, and it can. We actually had my wife noticed that our garage didn't smell right, and she had a sack of potatoes that she thought that's perfect to put them in the garage during the winter.
Yeah.
And somehow, that sack or the shelf that the sack was on got wet, and it started to grow mold just real quickly. And she could sense it as soon as she would pull into the garage and open her door. She was like, "Oh my word, something's not right in here."
Really interesting.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, that's the end of our list. As you mentioned, there's probably a few more, obviously maybe more than a few more things out there that we could talk about in terms of, is there mold in my home? Yeah. But I think this is a good list we made in these 2 podcast episodes. So
good start.
It's a good start.
Yeah.
We forgot to mention earlier, but if you have any other topics that you're interested in as it relates to mold, you're welcome to message us about that on our Instagram. It's Mold Matters. On Instagram, you're our tech guy.
I really am, Jared.
Tell us what they should do.
Yeah, I would.
In technical terms,
somewhere on your phone, maybe there's a potential to subscribe to Mold Matters. I mean, it could be green, blue button.
The button?
Yeah, it probably would say subscribe on it. That's been my experience. It says subscribe on it, and I think you can touch that.
Touch it, and then
or click on it. I don't know. If you have any trouble, give me a call. I can help you subscribe.
Okay. Yeah.
Give us
a call.
I can get my HDMI cord out and help you.
Is the podcast? Where can you find it anywhere?
Yeah.
Anywhere that podcasts are found.
Pretty much any podcast station. I honestly don't know.
It is everywhere. Anywhere you can find a podcast, you can subscribe to it. You can find us on, like I said, on Instagram, and we'll kind of give you teasers. Can't wait to find out what's going to be on the next Mold Matters podcast. But you can find out what we're doing next on there, as well as ask questions, engage with us a little bit if you want to. Topics. If you have any topics that are interesting to you, if we haven't seen or don't know about it, we're happy to delve into the research. But I would bet Mike's seen it. There's very few things that you haven't seen.
I was going to say is, when we kind of run our course in life in the mold industry, and we've given everything we've got, Joe, we got nothing left to offer anybody. Maybe my next life, I have an IT podcast guy.
Yeah,
I can give them IT advice.
Yeah. So if you live this life well, you'll graduate to IT, or is it a demotion?
No, I think that would be a promotion. I tell them, it's. I would probably first thing turn it off and then turn it back on
to fix an issue.
To any issue, yeah. And then after that, it gets a little more complicated.
Well, if anyone's listening by now,
they know me. Yeah.
All right. Well, that's all. Thank you very much for listening.
Thanks, guys.
We'll talk to you guys soon.
Thanks for listening to the Mold Matters podcast. Be sure to subscribe for more in-depth information on mold illness and recovery.